Hi, today I'm going to make a video for buyers who are considering making a purchase in New Jersey, specifically the suburbs of New York City, so about an hour outside of New York City. If you've never been to my channel before, I'm Victoria Canizzo. I'm a real estate specialist here in New Jersey. And again, I cover mostly the suburbs of New York City, about an hour from New York City. One of the conversations that I'm still having with buyers at the beginning of their search goes like this. If you see a property in a desirable town that looks move-in ready, that's been on the market for 5 to 7 days, you should call and check with me because there's a very good chance that it will already be gone. The cadence at which most savvy agents list properties in New Jersey, in my area, is that they get the property on the market by Wednesday or Thursday, with showings beginning after the broker open house on a Thursday morning. So by the time we get through Saturday and Sunday open houses, if it's a popular town and a desirable home, many people will have gone through a property like that. And most likely, if it's strategically priced, that means underpriced slightly, it will have multiple offers by the beginning of the week. So I want buyers who are just getting started to be very familiar with what will be the standard, basically the standard guidelines to multiple offers here. Now, I hear from buyers a lot when I start explaining this that they don't ever want to get into a bidding war. And I have to stop you right there because there's a misconception about what a bidding war really is in this area of New Jersey. When I ask people about that and I say, when you say bidding war, it really sounds to me like an auction where people are going to be raising their paddles at higher prices. Is that how you think it works? And very often they do think there's some back and forth. But in my area of New Jersey, the most common procedure is something called highest and best. And it is a one-shot blind auction. It's not really an auction, but offer process. So you're going to have to base your offer on the data provided to you by your real estate partner on comparable sales, where you think the value of the house is in terms of how it fits in with your lifestyle, and a number of other factors that we'll get into. But you will not have really the opportunity for a back and forth. I see it very, very rarely where two offers are almost identical and the listing agent will come back to those buyer's agents to see if they can improve in one way or another, give them the opportunity. But for the most part, it's a blind offer situation. It just is what it is. There's limited inventory and very high demand. So today, I'm going to take you through a pretty standard offer guidelines. Almost always we're sent these as a buyer's agent, or I will provide them as a listing agent if we have a lot of interest in a property. And I want to walk you through all of the most standard terms being requested. I think it's really helpful for you to familiarize yourself with these terms before you actually have to make an offer yourself. Because let's put ourselves through this situation again. A house comes on the market Wednesday or Thursday. You see it, or your agent sees it and sends it to you. And you say, great, when can I see it with you? You either go to an open house or you go to the house with your agent within the next 4 days, so before Sunday. And by Monday or Tuesday, the listing agent is asking for highest and best offers. If you've never seen any of these guidelines before, it could be a little overwhelming. So I really want to take you through all of the ways, all of the terms that are pretty standard for a listing agent to request, and also the ways I explain this to my buyers. Let's get started. Okay, some of these are going to be really obvious, but I'm going to read through them for you anyway, and I'm going to show you a copy in a minute. Fully signed offer with the opinion 26. This is pretty standard. There's nothing really to explain, but your agent will explain to you that we have a boilerplate contract in New Jersey. So there's certain parts that we as agents can fill out for you after we talk about terms, and you will be signing that. The second, copy of the MLS listing initialed by buyers. This one seems kind of strange, but I do it as well as a listing agent. This is because there are two different versions of any listing. So you will see as a consumer the buyer version of the MLS, so the multiple listing service listing of the property. And it will have a lot of details that are available on both versions, but it won't have agent remarks. And that's what the listing agent is trying to make sure that your buyer's agent, that your agent has explained to you explicitly. Very often, as is terms are listed in the agent remarks, and there could be other items listed. It lists the taxes from the township. Sometimes they're not updated to the current year, but the listing agent is covering themselves by saying, we want to make sure that your buyer has seen the full version of the MLS listing. Okay, next, signed copy of the seller's disclosure. Now, the seller's disclosure is something as a listing agent, I've always encouraged sellers to fill out. And it is now a requirement of the state of New Jersey that this is provided for every property, whether the seller has lived at the property or not. Granted, it's usually a lot more valuable when the seller has lived there. There's a lot more details, but it's really just meant to be to the best of the seller's knowledge. So you will read about how old some of the systems are, like the furnace, the water heater, whether there's air conditioning, many different details, what types of work has been done on the house since the sellers have owned, and a lot of other details, which you should definitely be able to speak to your agent about. It's a very good place for you to get information. Okay, next, proof of funds for all cash offers and deposit money. Okay, this is a good one. Technically, when you have a true pre-approval from a lender, that means that they have done a soft pull on your credit. They've verified your income and your any assets you might have and your debt. And so that pre-approval should be sufficient even when it's specifying a deposit amount. However, lenders can have a variety of different ways of saying pre-approval or pre-qualification. And to be safe, listing agents now want to see proof of funds for the deposit amount. Now, if you're making a fully cash offer, this is a little bit more obvious, but there are different ways to show proof of funds. So I do like to bring this up to buyers as soon as possible. It can be as simple as screenshots of bank accounts where we'll black out the account number. And as the next level would be actual statements, your most recent statements, again, with your account numbers blacked out. Or if you have a good amount of assets that you don't want to reveal to the seller, you can have your financial institution issue something called a verification of funds letter. This will simply say that you as the buyer has in excess of X number of dollars, whatever the purchase price is in that account. And that serves as a proof of funds. Now, back to proof of funds for deposits and down payment amounts. Another reason that a listing agent might be asking for this comes into play in some of the terms further down that we'll get to, mainly any appraisal language. I'll come back to this in a moment. Okay, the next one, mortgage pre-approval letter, if not cash offer, stating this offer is not contingent on the sale of other real estate. This is a pretty important one. And I'm planning on making a video for how to make an offer when you do have a contingency, different ways around that, because in such a competitive market, such a seller's market, it's very difficult right now to get an offer accepted that is contingent on the sale of another property. It seems kind of crazy because if you already own a home, it might be difficult to do this. There are ways around it, but people really want to see that right now. And it's hard to compete if you can't make a non-contingent offer. Next, buyers are not bidding on any other real estate. This is a funny one. It's not really legally binding, but it's something that is meant to assure the seller that you're not making multiple offers at the same time, and therefore they could choose your offer and then you could go with a different offer and they would lose their momentum with all these offers. So I generally put this in my cover letter for buyers as well as the additional contractual provisions of the contract. Okay, next. No escalation clause. This is a big one because I find that in other parts of the country and even the state, this is a lot more common, but in my area, it almost never happens that an escalation clause is allowed. I'm going to show you what an escalation clause looks like, but here's the basics. It means that you say, here is my offer, but I'm willing to go up in increments of You can decide what that is, whether it's $5,000, $10,000, $1,000, up to a certain amount, and that's your top. But remember what I was saying about this blind multiple offer situation? This sort of negates the benefit to the seller if you're showing your hand but saying, I'm not going to pay that much unless somebody else is offering the same amount. Again, in other parts of the country or where things are not quite as competitive, I understand why this happens more, but in our area, the seller doesn't have to show their hand like this. So it's almost never accepted. Okay, appraisal contingency. If your offer is mortgage contingent, consider waiving the appraisal contingency. Okay. So if you're getting a mortgage on a property, one of the aspects of the mortgage contingency, that they send out an appraiser to determine the value of the property. Now, the point of this is to make sure that the lender is making a good investment in whatever percentage they're investing into the property. So the most common would be 80% with your 20% down payment. They want to make sure that the house is really worth your purchase price. So this is something that came up during the mortgage crisis quite a bit. And one of the reasons we had the mortgage crisis, because there was a relationship between lender and appraiser. So now we've got a third party in between. So there can't be any funny business about that. However, this is a point in the transaction where there's some uncertainty for the seller. The timeline of a transaction in New Jersey starts like this: signed contract by the sellers once you've made the offer, attorney review period. Now, this can last for 3 days or 10 days. It really depends on the two attorneys. Then once you get through that portion, you have timelines for deadlines. Okay, so you've got a deadline for your deposit, you've got a deadline for your inspections, and you have a deadline for your mortgage commitment. So during that time, the appraisal will be ordered. But let's put it this way. Again, from the seller's point of view, if they have received multiple offers and they accept yours and your offer is above asking price, which most likely it will have to be because you wouldn't be competitive in any other situation, that means by the time they get to the appraisal, it could be 3 weeks from the time that they actually accepted your offer. So if you think about the other offers who were present at the time, they most likely have gone off. They're gone. So if something happens during the appraisal, for whatever reason, it doesn't appraise for the purchase price. Now, if you as the buyer haven't waived any portion of that, that's a new point of negotiation. It doesn't mean that they necessarily have to come down, but it does mean that the deal could fall apart. So this is a way that sellers are protecting themselves, and it's in your best interest to make your offer as strong as possible to waive the difference between the list price and your purchase price, or as much as you are able. I've talked about this in other videos and we can go back to this again, but it's a very important term right now. The next, home inspections. Consider limiting inspection requests to major issues and or offering an inspection waiver. So again, I've spoke about this in other videos, but I'll say it again. The most common language to use here is buyers will limit home inspection to major structural, mechanical, environmental, and safety issues, if any. This says, as the buyer, I'm not going to nitpick. I'm not going to go after you for a $20 outlet. I'm only interested in negotiating about major issues if I discover them. However, if we add the waiver amount, this makes your offer stronger. It defines what major means to you, and it really explains that you are not going to go after small items. So this is a conversation to have with your agent, but as comfortable as you can possibly feel in terms of that waiver amount, which kind of is like a deductible, you want to add that into your offer. This makes a very strong term. Okay. Sellers prefer all inspections within 7 days of completion of attorney review. This is another important one. You need to talk to your agent about your timing, because this means that you have to basically schedule the inspections immediately upon your offer being accepted. Now, another thing I like to tell buyers is that you should expect that you might have to take a day off of work for this, because most inspectors don't work on the weekends and they can be booked up pretty quickly. So that timeline is it's an important term for the sellers. They want to make sure that the process is moving along fairly quickly, because remember, any of those other offers, if your deal doesn't go through, the longer we get from the due date of offers, the less likely they'll be able to go to a backup offer. So this is just something to be aware of before you start making offers, because you need to know that most likely you'll need to take a day off. Next, sellers are flexible with close date, but prefer a quick closing. This one can vary quite a bit, but a quick closing in our area is between 3 and 5 weeks. We could say 3 to 6 weeks, but that's why I always partner with lenders who are very quick on their feet. You need a lender who really can move quickly to be able to promise even a 30-day close. I do quicker ones as well, but I would say 30 to 45 days is pretty standard in the market. And if you're really trying to be competitive, you can do a 21-day closing from being under contract. Okay. Buyer accepts with no known defects, fireplaces, chimneys, flues, washer, dryer, and sewer line. This one's a doozy. I would say that fireplace, chimney, and flues, I've talked about this in other videos, are almost always going to be transferred as is. And I'll link the video where I talk about this and the minutes below, because it's a topic that we could go into a lot of detail about. And this list will change per property. Like I just listed a property yesterday where we have the windows as is, because we know that they're older. We don't want anything to come up in the inspection contingency about them. Okay. Please include attorney information. This is important. Once again, timeline in the transaction is very important. So from the moment your offer is accepted, the listing agent wants your buyer's attorney information, because they want attorney review to begin immediately. The next day, there should be a letter out, if not the same day. And the buyer's attorney writes the first attorney review letter. So again, if you were coming to see a house this weekend with me and you saw a house you really liked and you wanted to make an offer, I want you to be prepared that we're going to be having this conversation before you're done writing up the offer. These are all the items that you'll need to know and be prepared for to make a competitive offer. This particular house that I'm reading the multiple offer instructions for came out a few weeks ago. There were 3 days of showings and 19 offers came in. I heard about a house in another town that got 80 offers. So we're still in this crazy seller's market, but it doesn't mean that you don't have a chance as a buyer. You just really need to be prepared. If you have any other questions for me, feel free to leave them in the comments or schedule a time through my Calendly link below.